Hey, Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Rafi, feeling great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about growth, about growing an out of network clinic. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to do what you're doing now.
Sure, I'm a physical therapist. I've always been an entrepreneur and worked for several different companies in the New York City area over the years. And long story short, about 4 years ago, started an in-home physical therapy practice. And we treat predominantly ortho and neuro, kind of a 50-50 split there. And we are out of network with folks that may have out of network benefits and also private pay. And that's kind of goes back and forth in terms of percentages, but probably right now 60% out of network and then 40% private pay where we just have their cards on file. So a pretty customized, curated experience. It's not for everybody. We don't have barbells. We don't have the full gym experience, but that's pretty much where we're at for the confines of New York City.
Yeah. So you're offering services in the home, right? As opposed to them coming to a clinic or something like that.
Correct. So we do in-home. We've done boardrooms, offices. I've been
Come to
in
you.
restaurants, helping chefs in their restaurant, treat them there, pretty much anywhere. So it could be hotel rooms, people that fly in New York City and stay for a couple weeks for a surgery. It's really unique. It always keeps it fresh.
Yeah. So I guess then was one of the main reasons for being out of network, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute, but was that mode of treatment, like going to the patient or the client's place of business or home or anything, was that one of the driving factors that chose you to do that? Or was there another reason that made you think, oh, I'll just go do in-home therapy?
Well, one of the reasons was I saw how other practices were doing it. I saw the approximate reimbursement throughout a network versus in network. And it was basically really, great or above average reimbursement per visit through out of network side versus in network. So in terms of your time and the reimbursement amount and being able to provide a above and beyond quality experience. So not just 60 minutes with each patient, which is not for everybody, but that's what we want to do. And then at the same time, being able to be compensated for that and communicating with patients between the visits and following up with them, kind of having a lot of these patients or clients for life. So it's across the continuum. I saw that as a promising business model as opposed to the in-network traditional model where it's a little bit more volume-based and typically is an office. Doesn't mean that there's not offices that are outpatient that do out-of-network across the country. That's certainly promising as well. It just seemed to fit for my type of situation at that time, and it made sense for my therapist and myself and our clients.
Yeah. So it was kind of both a business decision. It made sense financially, and then also from the quality of care. Huh?
Right.
Yeah. So when we say out of network, you're still, in some instances, you're still billing insurance, right? You're still submitting insurance or claims on their behalf, or are you providing your patients or your clients like a super bill or something that they're getting reimbursed for down the road?
I love how we're making this distinction, because if you're just giving someone a super bill or an itemized receipt, that is not out of network. You might say that you're out of network, but you're not providing any out of network billing incentive for the patient, right? So what we do is we have a medical biller. We verify everyone's insurance on the front end. If they have a deductible, they have to pay out of pocket, prorated, like whatever our approximate out of pocket rate per visit is. All those dollars, we're not pocketing those. All those dollars are reflected towards their out of network deductible. Once they hit that deductible, it could be the fifth visit. If the fifth visit, then their cost per visit would drop down, and then we're billing their insurance, their out of network benefits through that medical biller that gets a percentage of our collections like any other biller. And then we're billing that patient's insurance and their cost per visit. They get the same great experience. Someone coming conveniently to their home, doctor physical therapy, coming to their residence and getting the ortho or the neuro treatment, and their cost per visit drops once they hit their deductible. So they're oftentimes paying their in-network copay at that point. Yeah. So that's super appealing. Once they hit their deductible, they're having an in-network price, but a concierge or out of pocket or out of network type of an experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an important distinction because you do see a lot of people saying, at least on their websites and stuff, that they're out of network, but then it's still, well, you pay us up front and we'll give you this super bill and you can go get reimbursed. But there's a big distinction when you're doing some of that heavy lifting on the patient or client's behalf, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So cool deal. All right. So we've established the baseline. So you're doing in home, maybe in the restaurant, whatever, in boardroom treatments. You're doing some of the heavy lifting with the out of network billing side of things. How does it work from a patient acquisition standpoint then on your end? Are you marketing to physicians or referral organizations, or are you trying to go more direct to consumer in that route for new business development?
We've been direct to consumer this whole time. I
Awesome.
built the business through Google Ads, and now word of mouth is great. And the conversion rate for that is typically
Super
very
high.
high. It's very high, but you have to wait. Like there's, you could remind people like, hey, Rafi, like I would love for you to, refer any friends or, mention us to your neighbors or whatever. But you can't rely on that. And I believe it's slow. So what we do is Google Ads, and we've done it, almost from day one. That's how we grew the practice, and we end up getting folks in our orbit and speaking to them to kind of filter in and out if they're the right fit. Through Google Ads, folks that are looking for in-home physical therapy or the related, offering.
Yeah. Now, are you able to, because you're out of network and doing some of that, are you able to offer services that would not be otherwise covered via normal insurance? I'm thinking like maybe dry needling or some of those things that are coming kind of at the forefront that some insurance companies aren't paying for. Are you still providing that, and then you're still billing that out of network and the patient's making up the difference, or how does that work?
Well, the one answer to that is dry needling is not allowed in the state of New York. So we would probably have to get a different example. Yeah. So like if someone called in yesterday and they were looking for stretch therapy, which is like they want someone to come to them and passively stretch them for an hour. We told them like, hey, it's not medically necessary. Your insurance is not going to pay for that. Tell us what's going on. Maybe if you have other issues, but that purely would be out of pocket. So there's always a communication, like, back and forth about what they're looking for. And is it medically necessary? Is it medically necessary and a covered service or not? And then if it's not, like if they're looking for some hybrid, like we'll get, we've had people just call and say like, can you, walk our family member in the hallway or outside
just want
around
somebody
the block.
there to make sure they're not going to fall, right?
Right. So then it's like, well, then you got to evaluate them and see like, are they actually medically necessary? And they may be, but we've also had people call in. They're like, yeah, I can walk like 2 miles and I want to walk 4 miles. Like, well, you're already
that's a good goal.
You're already really good in terms of where you're at. And it's, that's something that we wouldn't legally be able to document and show medical necessity for.
Yeah. So I guess there's a distinction there as always, right? So
yeah.
I had a question. about the decision to go out of network. Obviously, when you and I spoke last time, you said you were out of network with Medicare too. I got 2 questions. The first one was, what made you make that decision from a market potential decision, right? Like obviously there's a lot of older people that use Medicare, and not going in network with Medicare kind of cuts a lot of that potential patient volume away. So what was your decision about doing that? Was it just too much of a headache, or you're already out of network and you're keeping busy, so why bother?
I didn't want to do the Medicare paperwork. If we grow, so the next conversation that we're about to have on the show, I'm sure we're going to talk about the acquisitions, that like those things are already set up. So for us, it was like, we're charging folks like on average X amount per visit out of pocket. We know that, if someone has Medicare and they're medically necessary, then typically we should actually refer them to someone that actually takes their Medicare. There's a whole gray area there.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to have to try to enroll into all these in-network plans and agree to these low reimbursements. It was like, I think when we started, it was like, I don't know, our time's worth like $100 a visit, $100 an hour. The visits, back then 45 minutes to an hour. So it was like, if Medicare is paying 100 for 4 units, after you have to do extra documentation. Like if you're seeing someone purely out of pocket, the state in New York, like the lowest documentation, the just satisfying the lowest form of what's documentable and required is less if you're literally just doing like paper and pen and you're charging someone like out of pocket. And it's more when it's the payers and the the EMR, and you got to click through a lot of stuff. So then like those systems and processes have made it more. So that was like basically in a nutshell, like why we skipped out on all that.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had some of these discussions. Being a former academic, I get them every now and then from former colleagues and stuff like that, specifically about out of network and private pay. And there's always the discussion of, well, I mean, if everybody decided to go out of network, no one would be able to get services, right? Like these people that need services wouldn't be able to get them. What is your typical response when you hear that?
I say that luckily there's always, I believe, a safety net available. Now, you're right, if everyone went out of network, then the whole system would have to change, and they would have to say, oh, well, maybe we should actually reimburse and pay therapists more. They're actually demanding, $200 a visit or whatever it is. So if everyone went out of network, there might be a gap where like people that actually need the care and the physical therapy would actually not get it at all. And that's terrible. But as you know, there's many of these like root causes of like the health insurance system, and we're kind of downstream playing in response to the symptoms or the challenges of the system. We're kind of just like playing the game. And that's a whole other conversation about, the healthcare system. That's kind of how I feel about it. I say right now, like if someone wants to work with us, we have like fixed costs for like the marketing costs. I have to pay my therapist. Like I had a conversation with a therapist today. It was like, hey, can you increase the rate? Like, can you pay me more because rent's going up and inflation and this and that and all that. So we're getting pressure from practice owners. Like I'm paying for an answering service. I'm paying for Google ads. I'm paying fixed costs to treat, my therapist. So I need some margin to reinvest it in the business so that we can continue to help the neighborhood or the community. But at the end of the day, not every business can be the right fit for every single consumer, I believe. So
yes, that's a very similar response to the one I give. Is like, well, it's a free market. Not everybody's gonna. Well, and from a business standpoint, like not every business is gonna choose to go out of network because they're in network already, and that's the cost of going out and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, let's dive into the interesting discussion at hand. So, when I had a conversation with Mike Pekatowski, I can't remember if it was this most previous one or the one from last year. We had a discussion around acquisitions and strategic players and the types of practices that purchase other practices and what they look for. And one of the big things that he talked about in that conversation was they look at payer mix. They look at reimbursement rates and contracts and all that, especially if they're going to be moving into a new geographic area. And I brought up the idea of, okay, so what about like these out-of-network practices? He said, oh, strategic partners don't necessarily purchase out-of-network practices because there's just not a whole lot there for them, because they're in network, right? That's their business model, their strategy. So as a result, you get a lot of out-of-network practices that might get really big, and they might add locations here and there and the other, wherever, but they haven't made the leap yet to think about growing through acquisition. And that's something that you're thinking about, right? You're in the process of doing. So talk with us a little bit about, one, why you made that decision to grow through acquisition as opposed to just organic growth. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you're going to make it work and all that kind of stuff. So just start with the basics. Why are you deciding to grow through acquisition in an out-of-network practice?
So one is I believe that we can get to, like I want to grow. I don't want to just stay where we're at. So that's like maybe like the foundational belief of like, I don't want to just like get to like a comfortable level and just like stay like that, maybe increase a few percentage points each year. I want to grow. And so I want to grow our platform company, which is the in-home therapy company, the practice. And I believe that we can get there faster through acquisition. Otherwise, we would just be doing it ourselves and we would just try to continue to grow, which is what we're growing organically with the Google ads, the word of mouth, all that type of stuff. So I've seen like a lot of other businesses, a lot of other practices, like they typically do that. the ones that we speak to now, and they say things like, man, I wish I didn't get complacent. I wish I did what you guys were doing 10, 20, 30 years ago. Right. So I want to grow. I believe that we can grow faster. It's not always going to be the best growth, because then if you grow organically, you can kind of curate your own culture along the way.
Yeah.
You can kind of grow your own thing as it goes. So there's going to be challenges that way. I'm not saying it's easy, but I just believe that we can grow via acquisition and get there faster, get to also end up helping more people and more patients and clients under our philosophy, under our type of business model through acquisition, as opposed to just organic growth only.
Yeah. So being out of network, then P.S. I like the growth through acquisition model. So I like to see that you're doing it in the out of network. So given your strategy, your out of network strategy, your targets, for lack of a better word, or the clinics that you might look at to purchase or acquire and bring into your fold, are you looking specifically for out of network folks, or is it one of those like you're looking for maybe in network if the culture is right, or if the size is right, or the geographic area is right, and then what do you do about your business model if one big EIN purchases another EIN that's in network with all these organizations, right?
So right now we have a practice under contract in Brooklyn. Under contract basically means like we've agreed on a purchase price and terms via a non-binding LOI, a letter of intent. And now we're kind of going, into due diligence. So that's where we're at right now. We are speaking with another 10, 12 practice owners that are kind of in the ballpark of seriousness in terms of selling some or all their practice. Now, the one we have under contract right now is 100% in network.
Yeah.
So when you're saying like we're taking our out of network model and making acquisitions, which is true, but we're not necessarily just acquiring out of network practices only. And we see that there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of ideas. It's going to take time and effort. But for the outpatient office that's in network right now that we have under contract, if let's say we close the sale today, there's going to be a lot of time and effort and work to go put into that. But our ideas are like, aside from cleaning up the billing, the revenue cycle management, that type of thing, we're going to have a billing team help us with that. But in terms of the offering, we believe that one thing, like we could immediately have home visits, or the concierge, like mobile visits, like almost immediately with our current home therapy practice. And then there's other things like with certain payers, like if certain contracts are below whatever it costs the practice to deliver one visit, like how much it costs to deliver one service visit, then some of those contracts might need to be dropped by us, by the practice. And then in those cases, then we may decide to go out of network with some of those payers. It's probably not going to be a clean swipe across the board and just like not overnight go out of network with everyone. I think that would be risky. We might, go by payer, maybe try to negotiate contracts. Obviously, that you have to be really, really big to probably get much of a change with negotiating contracts. So we're not just looking to acquire outpatient. We're not looking to just acquire out of network specifically. So it really depends, like the other thing you said, which is it depends on the owner, the culture, is the right fit, the location, the team, how long has the team been there? Like, are all the PTs like in and out? Like, is it a revolving door? Or are there PTs that have been there 5, 10 years, 15 years? Like, that's great because they're loyal, they're sticky, they're going to be there for a while. So, or they have been there for a while. So that shows like stability.
Yeah. Okay. So then from a standpoint of, okay, we picked this clinic, we're going to maybe look at them. Your evaluation, are you still looking in the same way that like a strategic in-network person might look at them? Or are you adding more value on maybe a geographic region, or maybe a contract that you're not in yet that you want to be in, or any of that? Like, does any of that come into play or change the way you look at a clinic from a valuation standpoint? Or is it kind of just standard, this is what best practice is in the industry and we're doing it this way?
You're saying in terms of valuing the practice?
Yeah.
So the first big thing, similar to what you mentioned on the episodes with Mike, is like, what's the annual net profit and EBITDA after add back? So after some of the owner's discretionary purchases, what is the EBITDA there? That's like the biggest component. But then there's always going to be a buffer. Like, how do we, the potential buyer and the potential seller, like, we're going to go back and forth. They're going to
Uh-huh.
say it's XYZ is worth more. We're going to say, I don't know, like it might not be worth as much as you believe it's worth, right? So like in that buffer, they might say, oh, so we've had a practice owner, you've seen the APO shoes with like the rounded bottom shoes
Yes.
that
Yeah.
some insurances pay for.
Uh-huh.
So there's a practice owner that we won't mention name or location, but they were like close to getting a contract for that. And one or more of the insurances would pay like a lot, hundreds of dollars or something, or thousands, for the therapist to kind of be the conduit for those shoes, like fitting and all that, and kind of teach them the exercises, or just, you know, walk on them or whatever. So, but that owner was saying like, hey, we might get this, but he or she didn't have it in place.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. You could say, if an owner said, okay, location, they're near the practices, the location is near the subway, it's it's on a busy street, or it's not. All of those things kind of go into the negotiation. We start with what's the net profit, the EBITDA, and then there's going to be all these other factors.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as location goes, I don't know if you've put a lot of thought into this or not, but it seems like there are some chains, we will leave them unnamed, that they're putting clinics on, like, they're like Waffle House down here in the South. They're like at every corner, you know, like, particularly for like an out of network practice. I'm curious about this. Like, have you thought about geographic location of your clinics? Because I'm assuming, at least my experience in our clinic, the patients that we see that are out of network or that are cash pay are usually willing to drive a little further to come see us than like an in-network patient might be, right? Because they're looking more for the convenience factor. When acquiring through this model, because you're out of network, are you kind of extending that geographic reach? Or are you okay with them being a little closer together? Or like, what are your thoughts on distance from locations?
Per practice, you mean?
Yeah.
Assuming they have multiple.
Exactly. Or if you're just going to start putting new ones out.
well, so one thing is, we're only speaking with practice owners in New York, New Jersey. There's a few practice owners that we've spoken with that have a mobile practice that's in other states. So that's appealing, because I already know that model. We do it here in New York, and there's other practice owners that are doing it like across multiple states. So that's appealing. But in terms of the brick and mortar outpatient offices, we're only speaking with practice owners in New York, New Jersey, because I'm going to be the one, you know, traveling and helping with culture, training, staff, all that type of stuff. So we're not looking to go past that right now until we, you know, grow a team.
Nail it down.
Also, we're not looking to do any de novos. We're not looking to do any startups. Our perception of assessing value and risk is like, there's already, this practice has been there for 10, 15, 18 years, and it's probably going to be busy and needed in the community for another 5, 10, 18 years, right?
Yeah.
So these bigger practices that are starting and popping up de novos, even here on the East Coast, it's happening. I'm like, wow, like, is there enough demand? Like, I guess they must have done enough, like, you know, underwriting, or not underwriting. They must have done enough like market research to see if there was enough demand. Our focus is acquiring profitable, reputable assets and practices, and not start de novos or startups right now.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. If they've been there for a while, they'll probably be there for a little bit longer, right? As far as just, this is my own curiosity now, New York, that area, are y'all pretty thick with like the volume of clinics that are out there because of the, I don't know, 11 million people that live in New York City or whatever? Or are you more spread out? Like, I guess, what's the state of the market there? Like, are there just PTs on every clinic, on every corner?
There's PT practices all over the place. There's 1, 2, 3. I mean, I can say names, like, they're like, and it's nothing against them, like, they're doing great. Like, there's Spear that has 25 locations. They're just in the New York City area. There's Professional PT that has all over the East Coast. There's Motion PT that has all over the East Coast. There's Ivy Rehab that's all over the East Coast. And now there a lot of them, even Ivy is coming into Brooklyn and to New York City. So there's a lot of in-network outpatient offices all over the city. There's some historically that have been inside of gyms, like New York sports clubs or fitness centers.
Yeah.
There've been, Blink Fitness, maybe even Equinox. And then there's the other, like the tier of like the independent private pay or cash-based physical therapist that wants to like go do their own thing, they could start doing home visits. They could, do a sublease somewhere and or go into some like boutique gym. So there's so much available patient demand that like, I guess there's competition, but also there's just so much demand because there's so many people, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always curious about that. Like whenever I travel to another state, I always look at, because I'm in the PT/OT world, I'm always looking and seeing, oh man, they don't have that many here, or man, there's a whole lot of them, It's
Right.
just, it's interesting. And I guess that speaks for the kind of the strength of the market too. Like if some of these big players are putting them up everywhere, then obviously there's something to it. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the acquisition, what you're looking for. Are you looking, maybe I didn't cover this one. So are you looking at some of these practices? Are these multi-location practices? Or are you looking specifically for like single brick and mortar, or maybe single location, just from a culture standpoint when you go in and acquire this practice?
We're looking for practices that are around $1 million in revenue or more. Now we'll speak to some practice owners that are maybe below that, but it really goes back to how long have they been in practice? How long have they been serving their community? And ultimately, like, we'll do a lot of outbound now. Like, as you know, like, I have a podcast, I have a show, like I'm trying to do that as a way for content marketing and to get more exposure. So we have practice owners reaching out to us. And what we found as a niche, so you were asking like, what do we look for? But on the other perspective is like, there's practice owners that if they haven't already sold to a corporate, one of the corporates I already just mentioned, if they haven't already sold to them in the past 3 to 5 years, because they've absolutely been contacted by all of them. If they have not sold to them by now, there's probably a reason. And typically what they say to us is they don't want to sell to a corporate. They would rather sell to a group like us that has physical therapists and is kind of like a PT owner group, meaning it like led by a therapist and is less of the big bureaucracy, corporate type of situation. Because otherwise they would have sold to them either before COVID or during COVID or now, in 2022. So those are the types of owners that we kind of have great conversations with. And we're open to both. Like we've spoken with and are speaking with practices that have anywhere from 1 location to 5 or 10, like that on the high side, or on the the scale side, that big. As of right now, nothing larger than that. That's going to take a lot more investment money and all that, but that's kind of our sweet spot right now.
Yeah. No, I like that distinction, the people that sold to corporate versus not. I purchased a clinic here at the tail end of 2020. And when I was talking to the 2 owners, the previous owners, about their clinic, and I knew we had a big chain that was buying up stuff, I was like, so, like, obviously they can probably offer you more than I'm going to offer you here. And they're like, I think it would kill our soul if we sold to them, so there's something to be said about the type of owner that would sell to a corporate versus non. You did mention just a second ago, investment money. So what's the funding mechanism for these acquisitions? Are you looking at PE or is it friends and family? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, great question. So it's our capital directly or indirectly through our board. So I created a board and it's my capital from the in-home therapy practice, basically, again, reinvesting back in the same way that we reinvest in the Google ads through the board. And then also I've met several different high net worth individuals over the years doing home visits for them and their family. Yeah. And I kind of kept them apprised of what we've been doing and what we're up to and my goals and everything. So one of them is someone who's very, very, very successful and has a family office. For the audience, if you don't know what that is basically like if you become a multi-millionaire, multi-hundred millionaire or billionaire, you do something called a family office where you hire a team, an investment team, to actually manage your own assets. It sounds crazy as a therapist probably, but that's a family office. Now, so that's one of our equity backers. And the reason why that's beneficial is because most of the other big corporate PT chains are private equity backed. Yeah. And those private equity funds have to get a return for their investors, every, 3 to 7 years or 5 to 7 years.
Crazy, right?
It's usually crazy. So what they do is they'll have to accelerate a lot of growth, and that puts a lot of pressure on therapists and they, in terms of, units or volume, completed visits, right? The benefit for us is that we have this family office that's like, hey, Dave, we love you, we trust you, we have a long-term investment horizon. So meaning we don't need that quick 5 to 7 year return. Now, of course they need and they want to return, but they know that it's a long-term play and it's not a short-term play, which I don't know. I've never heard of any of these corporate PT groups that are family office backed as opposed to being private equity backed. They're typically PE backed. And that's another area of differentiation for us, where that's also appealing for owners. They want to sell to someone like you or me because it's like a therapist they're selling to, but it also doesn't hurt that we have a different financial partner that has a long-term view, and that money is not tied to a fund that needs a measurable return to then return to their limited partners.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And some of those PE firms, like you said, they're trying to turn around quick. And a lot of times it ends up being another sale, right? Like they buy a group, or, they might even do a roll up where they take 50, 60 clinics, roll them all up into one fund. They try to accelerate that growth for like 12 to 18 months, maybe a couple of years. And then it's like, boom, we're selling you to somebody else too. And there's just, on top of the pressure for volume, there's also like this understanding, maybe it's unspoken or maybe it is spoken and talked about in those offices, that like management's going to change again, because they know that this PE firm just pushing them through, they're growing them, and once they hit their whatever level it is, they're selling them off to another group that's probably going to have more demands or different demands, and it just becomes a different bear altogether. I like the family office movement. So I guess that does lead to the next question too. So you're acquiring these clinics as a long-term vision. You got a family office kind of backing you financially. So the long-term plan for these clinics is what? You holding them for as long until you're ready to retire, or until you get to the point where you sell it, or what?
Correct. We really, of course, if there's investors involved, then they want to, they want to have some exit. And of course, with them, we have to talk about it. But we want to hold assets for the long term. We want to use the cash flow of the initial assets that we acquire. We want to be able to bonus the staff. We want to be able to show, that the staff can actually potentially have some type of an upside if they stay with us instead of go to some corporate or go start their own practice. And then also use some percentage of that cash flow to roll into other assets. And we want to hold them for long term. So I've read a lot with Warren Buffett. So long-term play, long-term investments. And it's turned out well for people like him and a lot of others that are in terms of a long-term horizon of holding practices or holding
Any
businesses
kind of asset,
that's always going to be in need. Like, Warren Buffett said things like, he bought into Wrigley's gum because, people were always going to chew gum. There was never going to be an app or technology that disrupts how people chew gum. That's the way I see physical therapy. I know there's apps out there, but I don't think there's ever going to be some killer app that's going to change the way that someone gets empathetical and high quality therapy, whether from OT, PT, whatever. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. We have folks on the show all the time that are either starting some new software piece in the rehab industry, or, they're starting some tool, or they've acquired some kind of technology and artificial intelligence or whatever it is. And people always freak out. Like, I'll get the shows that I get the most emails from are the shows about something that's going to quote unquote kill the industry, right? Like, I can't believe you're going to give these people a platform because they're going to turn us all into, button pushers or whatever. And I'm like, my way of looking at it is like, you can look at this technology as a force multiplier, right? Like, it has the ability to expand your reach in ways we never thought of. Maybe the clinics or the clinicians that go under because of it probably should have anyways in the first place. Right. Are y'all exploring other kind of revenue streams in those assets? Like, instead of just like pay per visit or volume or whatever, other types of revenue generation? Like, I'm talking to somebody right now. We just created a couple courses here, Proactive and stuff like that, like other ways of kind of pulling in or serving more clients and using that revenue as a means to, again, roll into more assets and all that kind of stuff.
I think the easiest thing to consider would be something like wellness memberships. So whether it's like those TheraBoots, the TheraBody, compression boots, or it's some out-of-pocket recurring membership, which you have the person's card on file, so that's very valuable, reoccurs every month. If you're showing value, like if it's actually helpful, they could come in, drop in anytime. Maybe they get soft tissue work, they get some assisted stretching, they get cupping, they get whatever it is out of pocket. Depending on the spacing, it could be sports performance, it could be sports conditioning, sports specific type programming, if you have that type of space, and if you're trying to serve that type of a population. But we're looking at things like that, out of pocket type services, less towards the digital course type thing. And I would love in the future, I would love to hear how it goes for you, because if you find that it's helpful or beneficial,
if it's taken off, we'll let you know.
Yeah, you let us know. But at the end of the day, like if someone has some mild form of back pain, and if they pay you $250 for some 12-week digital course, great. And if it helps them, great. I just don't think those types of things like digital courses are going to be able to solve a lot of the world's like orthopedic issues, and especially like neurological issues, vertigo, dizziness, whatever. No one's going to an app for that type of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, knowledge translation is obviously something that's, at least in my opinion, one of the biggest value adds that clinicians bring to the table anyways. So I'm always looking at, well, maybe if you develop something that is some form of knowledge translation, at the end of the day, maybe it is just like the funnel that gets them into your clinic or something like that, right? Like you said, someone with a vestibular issue is not going to be able to use an app on their smartphone and do an Epley maneuver on themselves or something.
Right.
Or something.
Right.
All right. Let me see if I have any questions coming to mind. So we talked a little bit about kind of the acquisition. As far as culture goes, like when you're having these conversations with these prospective organizations that the clinics that you're looking at buying, was part of the process having a conversation with staff and management and kind of getting a feel for their sense of purpose or whatever you want to call it within the organization? Or has it really been just kind of owner to owner or executive to executive conversations?
In the beginning, just owner to owner. So ultimately that's the owner's decision as to when he or she may tell their staff. And many of them are not going to tell them unless it's really close or actually
something
close.
happening, right?
Because they don't want to scare them. I've heard owners on my podcast say both ways. Like they told their staff up front, like that's who was visiting or whatever. Also, we've toured practices and we met with owners after the clinic closed that day. So we don't necessarily meet all the staff, and you don't necessarily know how the clinic is in terms of the culture. But you try to piece it together, right? You got messaging on the website. You have Google reviews, maybe there's Yelp or Facebook reviews. You kind of look at the online messaging. You could do, let's see what we have done. I've been a patient. I had some neck discomfort, and last year when we were looking at a different practice, I went into the practice. I scheduled an evaluation for neck pain. I went in. Nice. And now I didn't tell that owner, and I haven't done it with all the other candidates that we're targeting right now. But I went through that whole process. The owner didn't get upset. He said, "Hey, Dave, if I were you, I would do the same thing." Right. So I got to go in as the patient, as a real patient, and kind of see how I was welcomed in the office, how I was told to wait, paperwork, that whole thing, brought back, how I was evaluated and treated, knowing I'm a therapist. So I know what actually should occur. And like anytime something didn't, then it's like, oh, whatever. So that was helpful. I've had family members come visit us, and we send them into some of these offices as secret shoppers, and they go in and they say, hey, like in person, like, hey, do you take whatever insurance, or, can I get some more information, and can I get some brochures or whatever? And then the place doesn't have brochures to hand out, just little things all those things. You can learn a lot. You can't learn it all unless you're in the office and you're kind of seeing and hearing the culture. But in the small time that we've done this, I have been pleasantly surprised seeing how the team the therapists are communicating with each other or with patients. And that is super reassuring. But anytime someone's going to spend, X amount of some substantial dollars to potentially acquire any practices like this, it's important for someone like us to do our own due diligence. And maybe we could save it for the podcast where I have you on my show. But like, did you do any of those things? Did you, maybe you knew the practice already?
Yeah, I knew the owners before, and then a couple of my former colleagues or classmates had been through they had worked there or whatever. So I kind of had an inside view. One of my friends, his wife worked here for like 5 or 6 years. So I was like, okay, got a little bit of feel for how it's working or not working. Right. I guess, so another question kind of comes off of that one. So you're looking at these, you're kind of getting the high value picture of their or the high level picture of their culture, how things are working, their processes. Have y'all developed like what does he call it in the E-Myth? A prototype, like almost like a franchise model where you're like, these are the systems that are going to work and we're going to buy you and we're going to apply these systems to your practice, or have you given much thought about that kind of what happens post acquisition?
Sure. I mean, one example is what we do already for my home therapy practice, Concierge Pain Relief. So if someone calls my practice, like, it gets answered by an answering service person who kind of reads through our script and like gets your information, and then someone from my team does the callback. So at least like we have that in place. That's like a small thing, but like these potential acquisition targets, I'll call their office like 8 p.m. on a Friday, 5 p.m. on a Saturday, and like the call doesn't get answered, which is fine, but then I don't leave a voicemail, and then my call never gets returned. It's like I could have been a prospective patient, and my call doesn't get returned, or the call doesn't get answered. That's like one little thing that, of course, we have like a playbook per se of what we believe works with the Concierge Pain Relief, and we're absolutely going to implement those types of things. But it's more on the front end, and it's more on the patient experience side of things. It's about communication, and it's about taking someone through a process, like a conversation, that we kind of touch on the whole insurance and cost. But we try to nicely touch on that and then get off of that and then talk about their situation. Rafi, tell me about what's going on. Oh, it sounds like that's frustrating. We've had other clients that have an XYZ issue, and they've mentioned that they've been dealing it like that, dealing with it just like you're mentioning it. Here's what they found to be helpful. Here's how they made a decision. Here's the things that we've been able to help our clients with. Maybe we send them testimonials, whatever. But our onboarding calls are longer in duration. And those are some of the things that we're probably going to bring to our acquisition targets. That's one thing of like several behind the scenes.
No, I think that's awesome. One of the first things I did when I bought this practice was basically put, not a script, I hate the word script, but it's a framework. It's a conversation framework for when somebody calls. And it's like, these phone calls might take you longer than they did before, but the patients or the prospective patients are going to walk away from that experience feeling like, oh my gosh, this clinic cares about me. And that's what you're shooting for, right?
Exactly.
So, it's always interesting to think about. I did not really put a whole lot of thought into like business frameworks. And when I purchased this thing, I'm going to take this model and apply it here, because I didn't have one before. I was, I'd been doing a lot of consulting, and I took some of the frameworks that I use with my clients and put it here. But
there you go.
Having a what do you call it? A kind of like a sample that you're doing here now with the clinic, and then taking that, what's working, and applying it to an acquisition target is probably a little bit easier because you had the real world experience.
And just from the example I gave, like the communication piece on the front end, then, and the same thing with your framework, like you implement that type of thing. Maybe the practice didn't have that set up, and then now all of a sudden the cancel no-show rate goes from 20% to 10%, or from 15% to 7%, and more folks are actually arriving for their visits. Now for us, it's easier because we're going to people for the home visits, but in an outpatient office, like more people that actually arrive, they're more likely to complete their plan of care. They're more likely to get the result that they wanted. They're more likely to tell more people about that office or that clinic and that experience. And that's kind of like the part of the marketing machine kind of fulfilling process where it's just going to continue.
All righty. Well, we're getting near the end here. Thanks so much for taking the time. I'm trying to think if there's anything like 1 or 2 main takeaways you would want a listener to walk away with from the show, what would they be?
Takeaways, look outside the box. Like there's opportunities, just like Rafi, to Rafi, you didn't have a practice before you acquired this one, right? Or did you?
No, I was a
You
consultant
did.
before.
So most people think, most therapists, PTs, OTs, right? They think they have to go work for somebody, or maybe they start a practice, and you did something that's not one of those two things. So like, think outside the box, look and find resources like this type of an episode. Like there's ways where you don't have to have a practice like I do and then go acquire practice. You can do what Rafi did, and you can acquire a practice that you already know and you trust, and you see that you can work hard in it and implement new ideas and potentially new strategies. And you don't need to go work for somebody else, or the daunting task of starting something from scratch, which is also challenging. And that's probably the biggest takeaway. PTs, OTs, there's other things you can do out there. Look at the pros and cons of acquiring someone else's practice. There's a lot of potentially motivated sellers out there. There's folks that are even in their 40s, 50s, 60s that are either looking to retire, start the next chapter of their life. Maybe they want a different pace of life. Maybe they're looking to move. And you, the PT or OT listening, might be the best fit, where that owner wants to sell to a therapist instead of a corporate buyer. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, but you have to go and find it. You have to, reach out to practice owners. You have to, get a network, contact people on LinkedIn. I listened, somehow you and I got connected on LinkedIn, and I heard your podcast with Mike, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I reached out, and we started talking from there. So you have to do a lot of outbound. You have to have, energy. You have to, find opportunities. And once you do that, you'll find even more opportunities than you even believed were even possible.
Awesome. That's great. I think I'm going to title this episode Think Outside the Box.
Nice.
So where can people find out more about you, about your work, connect with you? You've got the podcast, all the places.
Sure. So if you're a therapist, or especially a practice owner, definitely check out the Dave Kittle Show. So Kittle on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify. If you're looking to connect, you can just type in Dave Kittle into LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, but LinkedIn is probably the best professional spot for us to connect. And my practice is Concierge Pain Relief Home Physical Therapy. So if you're a therapist in the New York City area, Long Island, New Jersey, upstate New York, but it's specifically in New York, if you're looking to make $80 to $100 per visit as a therapist, and we potentially could hire you, if you're looking for that, feel free to reach out to me, Dave@conciergepainrelief.com. My email address, Dave@conciergepainrelief.com.
Awesome. We'll link to all that in the show notes. So thank you very much, man. Have a good one.
Excellent. Thank you.